The golden calf of Moses at the foot of Mount Sinai was one of the most misunderstood stories in the Bible. Although all the elements are there in the Bible, mostly the misunderstanding comes from the fact that we do not understand how societies, how city-states were created back in those days. It's very much the same way today, except for we have a little bit different modus operandi because of our highly technical society. But basically, it comes down to the same thing. You have to remember when people went into subjection in Egypt, all the gold and silver was in the treasuries of the Pharaoh. And the people had to use something else for money in exchange between themselves. And one of the things we know they used were these little clay scarabs with little numbers or markings on them that were used as if they were money. And they were probably issued by banks or by the government some way. There were other things they used as trade goods for money. But they didn't use gold and silver because that had real value on a worldwide trade market. What they were using was only good pretty much in Egypt and within the Egyptian jurisdiction. The people didn't really own any gold. They couldn't own any gold themselves. It all belonged to the government. It was all controlled by the government. It's been that way in countries like the United States since HJR 192, I think it was, when they outlawed the private ownership of gold. Now, we still are allowed to own gold in the United States if you're a citizen, but you can't use it as money because HJR 192 was repealed. But going back to the history of the Bible to show you that these things just keep repeating themselves over and over again, when the people left Egypt, they were allowed to own gold. They were actually taking gold with them. They carried it in their own purses and in rings, and that was the way they carried their wealth. But when Moses was gone and there were Amalekites and Amalekites, we have to realize also that they weren't really out of Egyptian jurisdiction physically. They were just had no Egyptian jurisdiction over them in persona. They were free. They were whole. They were in possession of their rights. They were no longer slaves. But they were still surrounded. Egypt's jurisdiction went all the way to Canaan. But they weren't subject to that jurisdiction in the same way that they had been when they were in the bondage. They could own their own money. Eventually they owned their own land. But when Moses was gone there for a little while, they said, let's do what all the other people do, and we would make this golden calf. They didn't worship it. They actually deposited their wealth in this golden calf. It was accounted for as that went in. And they were obviously receiving something in exchange so they could use something as exchange amongst themselves as money because they weren't going to have their gold anymore. And when Moses came down, he was livid. They had put all their wealth in this golden calf. And eventually, not like the movie, it didn't fall into a pit or anything. They ended up redispersing it in a kind of a strange, bizarre sort of way. But the fact is, this was wrong. They were to carry their gold, their money, their values, their personal family wealth in their own pockets and not bind themselves together with this golden calf. Had the Amalekites attacked, the theory was if you ran across the desert and abandoned society, you abandoned all your wealth. So you had to stay to protect this golden calf. It went farther than that even. Athens had a golden statue, which they often sawed off a piece of every once in a while and melted down and make coins during times of war. It was called the reserve fund. This was common among city-states. It wasn't superstition. It was practicality. But it was not the ways of God. God wants you to be bound by faith, hope, and charity. If you bind yourself any other way, authoritarian men like Nimrod and Caesars and pharaohs will rise up, and you will be a subject people, not a free people under God.